and you just grab it underneath the ball there, and just real gentle, not much pressure, and then you just kind of lever it over your finger. And then
Does it matter which order you pull them out in?
no,
Oh, they're all the same orifice, probably.
well maybe, but these are wood pins, so it doesn't matter. So what I do is I put them in order.
Okay.
So I keep the pins in the order that I take them out, so that they go back in the same hole.
Got it.
Probably doesn't make a difference, but just in case, I know it's going to go back to exactly how it was before if I put them back exactly how they came out. Even though it's a pretty small distinction. Okay, save these ball ends. Let me cut these off real quick.
Why do you cut them off?
On certain vintage guitars, I put an extra ball out down the string,
Yeah.
and what it does is it's that portion of the string that's folded over.
Yeah.
What it does is it takes that portion and it takes it from it being on top of the saddle and moves it back down, because that ball end pulls that string down just a little bit. So I just save them. But that's on like the 1930s style guitars that have really thin bridge plates and lower bridges and lower action.
You were saying depending on how often you play guitar should really determine how often you change the strings.
Yeah, if you're playing every day for an hour or so a day, probably every couple of weeks maybe.
Okay.
If you're using elixirs, you can leave them on until they break, or you can leave them on until you don't like the sound, or they get too scungy.
I started noticing the sound has been changing,
Yeah,
and that's happened in the last week or so. The sound has gotten a bit different.
now when the strings are off, it's a good time to dust it off underneath the strings, and then you can clean it off and dust off your saddle and the top of the bridge there. That's all good to go now. All right. So now, okay. Now another thing you can do is you can take that ball end and you hold it in your hand and just
Bend it a bit?
just bend it forward just a little bit, and then make that bend go forward like this, and that'll help it clear the end of the pin. Because you don't want that ball end resting on the end of the pin, because then you'll go to tune it up and your bridge pin will shoot across the room into the fourth dimension.
Okay.
Just a little bit, not much.
Just a little bit of a bend
Just a little
inward,
bit. Yeah.
so it stays in. Do you think the strings I pulled off, or you pulled off, were elixirs?
Yeah, that's why they're fuzzy. It's the coating that gets fuzzy when it starts to wear out.
So put a little bit of an inward bend on it.
Yeah. And when you're dropping it in, you can feel it come past the end of the pin,
Yeah.
and that's what you're looking for. You want to
I've been playing more and more and more, and I noticed that the quality of the sound started to change, and then the
Yeah.
colors started to change.
Yeah.
And I thought, well,
And they won't stay in tune as good either. But you see how it's coming up and down?
yeah,
That's because that ball end is still on the end of the string, so you want to get that clear. You want to get that ball end clear of the end of the pin. All right, so now I got my handy dandy Frank's crank. These are like $100 worth every freaking penny, because this angle is not 90 degrees.
okay,
And it's just genius. It's the perfect pivot to your wrist
okay.
for the angle. This guy Frank Ford, the world's greatest repairman and my hero, makes these. He gave me this one, and they're totally
You
badass.
can get them locally.
No, you have to go online.
Okay.
Frank's Crank from Gryphon Instruments in Palo Alto, California. But you play guitar and you change your strings, and you're going to do it for the next 20 years. Get a good tool.
Okay.
It'll last you forever.
So what's the key? Feed
Okay.
feed it through.
So now I have the string, the hole kind of mostly pointing towards the bridge is what I want to do. And so you bring the string through, and then you put it up about maybe 4 inches or so, just enough slack. Actually, that's a little more, maybe 5 or 6 inches, but just enough to get. Like it should be almost difficult to get that first wrap over the top, and it goes over the top of the. It's called free running end in rope work. Okay, then you bend this up out of the way. Then with your crank or by hand, you crank the rest underneath, and you should have 2, maybe 3 wraps when it comes up to pitch. See that? So what? If you look at that shaft, it's concave. So as this thing pulls, this thing is going to pinch down and grab a hold of this and kind of lock it in place.
Got it.
And then with only 2 wraps, there's only 2 wraps worth of string that has to stretch out, because this string is going to stretch a little bit before the tuning will stabilize. So if you've got 6 or 8 wraps on there, all of that stuff has to stretch out before the guitar will settle down, and it'll take forever.
So it's not a good idea to come through the hole and then start wrapping it, because it'll take forever for it to stretch.
Yeah. You want like 2 or 3 wraps. That's plenty. It'll stay in tune, and it won't take long to settle down. So we got it through. Now I pull all the slack out, and then I just pull enough back that I can just
Wrap around.
get that top over.
Looks like you're going clockwise.
Yeah. Yeah, they wrap towards, on a 3 to a side, they wrap towards the inside. So the other side will be the other way.
When you just said 3 to a side, so on a 6-string
1, 2, yeah.
guitar.
No. There's 3 on this side, 3 on this side.
Uh-huh.
Like on a telly, there's 6 to a side because all the tuners go the same direction because they're all on one side of the headstock.
You slightly tuning those 2, or fully tuning those 2.
Yeah, I tune them up because they're gonna come down and pitch, and we're gonna stretch them a little bit. And usually, what I'll do is I'll work from closest to the headstock further out.
Is it because of the thickness of the strings?
No, just because the other strings will be in the way if you go the opposite direction.
Common sense.
And take these 2 and get them out of the way. And take your high E.
Now you're wrapping the other way.
Mm-hmm. And the second wrap. And then we're coming up on wrap 3. Perfect.
Starting to sound like a blues guitar.
Yeah.
You're keeping your finger on it to keep the tension,
Yeah.
the slack out of it a bit, right?
Yes.
So you keep it tighter as you're pulling it.
Where's the hole? So I'm holding the tension up over here too, see that?
Yeah.
So but with these 2 fingers, I'm just keeping it under tension so it's not flopping all over the place. And it's feeding in exactly how I want it. And then when it starts to get tight on these fingers, I can back it off and just drop that in the nut slot. Okay, so that's good to go. Now what I can do is clip off the excess. And usually I just put these right at the top of the tuner.
How would you know if your strings you pulled off matched? Obviously, if you went and bought the same strings every time, you'd match them the same. But if you're a first-time buyer of a new guitar, like this was a new guitar a year ago, these are now new strings. Are these pretty close to the other strings without measuring them?
Yeah, well, you'll if you go up a gauge or down a gauge, it'll feel really different.
Okay.
So it'll feel really stiff compared to if you go up a size, and it'll feel really loose if you go down a size. So your left hand will be able to tell if the size is off, and you know, that's mostly a feel thing. So you know, you're gonna try some strings, and if you don't like them, you can try some different ones.
Okay.
But you can also take them to your luthier and have them put a set of dial calipers on them, and he'll tell you exactly what size they are.
That's what you are.
Yes. So now I've got these on. They're all tuned. I tuned them to pitch as I was putting them on. Now you can just take the string and just give it a little stretch down its length, each one.
Were you pushing it over to the next string essentially?
I'm just taking and turning it. I'm just putting a little extra tension on it. See, I'm like using this hand here and I'm pushing it. See that?
What's the idea behind that?
It's stretching the string out. The steel is actually going to physically stretch.
Okay.
So that's why we have to. That's why we got to crank up some little more, because now that I've tuned it to pitch and now I've stretched it out, this string is going to be like a quarter of an inch longer between the tuner and the bridge.
Makes
so
sense.
I got to take up another half turn of tuner post to get it back up to pitch.
So you're just working your way down the fretboard from the cutout all the way to the end of the neck?
Yep. There, went down a whole step, went down to D. And the first time you tune it, you can go a little sharp if you want.
Go sharp, that means you're going another step up, so you're
No,
tightening.
just a little bit, not a step, not a whole note. But if you look on the tuner, you see there's a couple of green lines on the left side. That means I'm a little bit flat, but I'm in tune. But then when it gets right there on both sides, that's in tune. But if you go a little bit sharp, that's okay, because now I'm going to go and just stretch it one more time real quick. Maybe not as thorough as last time. Now to the right to pitch.
That string is typically always either a little high or a little low for me. And then that one is kind of not far off of where that B string is.
Here we go.